Hello, and welcome to my top 10 Transformers review for my top 10 favorite characters, in my opinion. It's of the Generation 1 characters, but not of the 1985 characters or the movie characters. I will be doing a top 10 reviews for those as well later on, but for now this is just of the very first run of characters, like from Season 1 and issues 1 through 13 of the Marvel Comics, the first run of characters, including the Dinobots and Devastator, but yeah, just the very first run of characters. And I will be doing variations on both the comic and the TV series, picking one or the other for each individual character, depending who I liked better as a comic character or as a TV show character. So I'll be going in between those two and noting the differences between each of them too, from the comic versus the TV show. So let's begin. Number 10 is Thundercracker. The reason why I picked him, this is the profile version from the Transformers Universe series that Marvel produced, and as well as the Dreamwave profile from those comics, because they're pretty identical. Not the TV show, or not the comic even. The comic didn't even really get in depth with his character. The reason why I picked him is because he's the most unique from all other Decepticons in one sense. It states in his profile that he's very unsure of the cause he's fighting for, or that he's even on the right side, and he really questions their cause, and he's almost borderline Autobot. They make it pretty clear that he's really debated if he's on the right side or fighting for the right cause. The thing that holds him back, they stated, was the authority Megatron wields, and that he is too afraid of Megatron to rebel or speak out for fear of the repercussions he'd receive from Megatron, and that keeps him in line to follow orders. But I always felt they could have followed up on this and incorporated it more into the storyline. Maybe not have him question Megatron up front, but have him kind of sneaking around behind his back, kind of, aiding the Autobots or doing something to rebel. So that's why I picked him. I feel he's pretty unique Decepticon, so that's why I chose him for number 10. Number 9 is Sunstreaker from the Dreamwave run of Generation 1 comics they produced, and the reason why I picked him is because he's probably the most unusual Autobot in one sense, out of the first ones to arrive on Earth. He kind of shares that parallel with Thundercracker being the most unusual Decepticon, in my opinion. He's the most unusual Autobot in one sense, because he has a very violent and brutal nature, especially towards Decepticons. They make that pretty clear in the original episodes and the comics of the originals, but they didn't really express just how far he's willing to go, which Dreamwave did. In one of their issues, actually, on one of the pages, they show him getting pretty threatening with Bumblebee, threatening to hurt him. So I found that really interesting and cool that they really brought to light just how far he's willing to go, just how mean and violent he can be, and how sadistic. I almost felt that he's like the Starscream of the Autobots, even in the original stories, actually. I always thought he was kind of like him in one sense. He's very self-indulgent. He's always worried he'd get scratched or dented or his paint finish ruined, and I always found that very similar to Starscream in the sense that he's very vain and egotistical about himself. So I always thought they share a similarity that way. And actually, if you even look at the sides of his head, the panels or fins or vents or whatever they are, I think they're vents, but those panels on the sides of his head, if you look at Starscream, he also has the same kind on the sides of his head. So I always found that interesting, how they shared that same physical trait, and I almost wondered if Marvel or Hasbro intended on this for him to be represented as kind of the Starscream of the Autobot team. So, and I thought Dreamwave did a really good job at bringing to light just how sadistic and violent he could be. So that is why I chose him for number 9. Number 8 is Jazz from the original TV series, and the reason why I went with him is because, well, I mean, come on, it's Jazz. Jazz is awesome. He loves humans' music, their pop culture. He's very versed in things human. And I always thought he was a really neat character for this because I felt he was probably the most human-like out of the Autobots, because the rest of them, you know, they guarded and protected humans, but they were still very formal in their dialogue with the humans, whereas Jazz was more almost like their link to understanding human beings better. And I always thought it was great how he, amidst all this war and chaos and stuff, he still knows how to have a good time and have fun, and he wants to party and stuff. So I really liked him for that. And he almost seemed like he almost had a more compassionate side towards human beings too, not just that he was there to protect them, but he understood them quite a bit more than the others. And so I always thought that was really neat, which the comics never really got that in depth with him. They had a couple of phrases similar to the show, but he seemed like more like just another generic Autobot in the comic series, so that was disappointing. So that's why I favor him in the TV series. And actually, I'm a Stephen King fan, and the voice actor, Scatman Crothers, a lot of people don't know about this, but he actually was in Stephen King's movie The Shining as the cook in there, and he was really great in that. If you haven't seen it, you should totally check it out because he's great in that. And yeah, Jazz just all around an awesome character, and I was so glad that they never killed him off, because that would have been really upsetting for me. So that is why I chose him for number 8. For number 7, I've chosen Grimlock, and this would be the Grimlock from the original comic series, not the television series. Definitely not. I want to make that very clear, because after a point in the television series, and I'm sure diehards know what I'm talking about here, he became kind of a silly, Barney-like babyish version of himself. I'm of course talking about when the movie came out. He became really ridiculous and silly. So that's why I'm going with the comic book version of Grimlock from the original series. And I found him a very interesting character, very diverse, really interesting in the sense that he was almost like a barbarian among civilized men, in the sense that he turned into a T-Rex, whereas the other Autobots turned into sophisticated fancy cars. But not only that, he also had a more barbaric side in his personality rather than the other Autobots. And this really shows when Optimus Prime dies. And in the movie, Rodimus takes over for Optimus when he dies. But in the comic around the same time, when Optimus dies, Grimlock takes over. And one of his first acts of real cruelty shows when Blaster leaves the Autobots, and Grimlock has the Protectobots pursue him and arrest him for treason, for desertion, and even tries to have him executed. So this was really the first point where you really get how cruel and barbaric Grimlock can be. And I found him very interesting for that. And I almost felt like Beast Wars was paying homage to him with Dinobot, because they're very similar in the sense that Dinobot is very intelligent but still has that savagery to him, like the original Grimlock from the comic series. And although Grimlock still had that speech impediment like the TV series, but in the comic they made it seem like it was more like a glitch or something, because he still had his wits, his leadership skills. He still seemed very intelligent. But I feel that Dinobot was very influenced by the original Grimlock from the comics, because you can tell the Beast Wars creators were influenced by many things about the comic, because there's even mention of Primus in one of the Beast Wars episodes, whereas Primus was never mentioned in the original television series, but the comics he was. So that shows that they were very influenced by the comics. And I just found Grimlock all around a really interesting character, and I really liked the fact that Simon Furman had really got into his character, and really by the end of the series made it seem like he had a little more compassion in him by the end of the series. Like, I don't know if Simon Furman was saying that being around the Autobots long enough kind of rubbed off on him, their compassionate side. So I thought that was really neat that he incorporated that into his character. So very, very interesting character from the original comic series. If you haven't read them, you totally should. You'd be much more impressed with that Grimlock. So that is why I've chose him for number 7. Stay tuned for my part 2 of my review of favorite Transformers. Thanks for watching.